The text came in at 11:43 on a Tuesday morning. "Hey Mom, quick thing. The shower is kind of a vibe Priya has been building for months. All her work friends and college girls, very curated. We think it might be better if you skip it. Don't want you to feel out of place. You understand, right?" 41 words. I read them twice. Then I set my phone face down on my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my brokerage account, and began the process of closing a custodial investment account I had opened 11 days earlier. The account held $100,000. It had been established for my future grandchild, my son Devin's baby, who was due in 9 weeks. I had spent 4 months building it quietly, moving money I'd saved and invested over 20 years into a structure that would compound for 18 years and hand that child something real when they turned 18. An education fund, a head start, the kind of thing my own grandmother had wished she could give me and couldn't. I closed it in 22 minutes. The funds returned to my primary account. The custodial account ceased to exist. And because the account had been opened at the same private banking branch where Devin and his wife Priya did their banking, I had set it up there specifically so the transfer on the child's 18th birthday would be seamless. The branch manager, a thorough woman named Ms. Aldridge, sent a standard account closure notification to all parties listed as beneficiary contacts. Priya's name was on that list. Her phone rang at 12:09. I know the time because Devin called me at 12:14, and I could hear in his voice that he had been talking to someone in the 4 minutes prior. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened on that Tuesday, subscribe to this channel right now. Every story here is for the person who has spent years building something, for someone who decided they were not worth a seat at the table. Hit subscribe. Come back, because this story starts long before that text message arrived. My name is Serena Okafor. That year I was 46, and I had been a financial analyst for 21 years, first at a firm downtown, then running my own practice out of an office I leased the year Devin started college. I specialize in long-term wealth structuring for families, which means I spend my days building the kind of patient, compounding plans that most people don't think about until it's too late. I am very good at it. I have been building wealth slowly and deliberately since I was 22 years old, when my first paycheck arrived, and I put 30% of it away before I spent a single dollar. Devin knows I work in finance. He has always known this in the way people know things that don't connect to anything they need. Finance is what Mom does. It pays for the house, the vacations, the college education he completed without debt, because I structured for that from the year he was born. He has never once asked what I do in specifics. He has never asked about the structure of his own education account, what it took to build it, why his college bills were paid without conversation while his friends were negotiating loans. There is a memory I come back to. Devin at 19, home for spring break, sitting at the kitchen table while I went over quarterly statements at the counter the way I always have. He looked over at me once and said, "Mom, do you ever turn it off?" I asked what he meant. "The numbers," he said. "Like, do you ever just not think about it?" I said I didn't know what that would feel like. He nodded and went back to whatever he was doing, and the conversation ended the way a lot of our conversations about my work ended, with a kind of comfortable distance, not hostile, just two people who live in different registers. He is warm and he is funny, and he has his father's ease with people, and I am precise and patient, and I live inside numbers in a way that people who don't love numbers find hard to imagine. I accepted that distance a long time ago. I did not expect it to matter until the day it meant he had no idea what he was declining. He married Priya 2 years before that text arrived. She works in brand strategy, which is a real and skilled profession, and she is excellent at it. I know because I looked, because I look at things carefully, because that is who I am. She has a specific talent for curating environments, for understanding what a room communicates, for building atmospheres that say something deliberate about the person who designed them. In those 2 years, I had watched the atmosphere of Devon's life become more deliberately curated. New furniture, selected with precision. A social circle that photographed beautifully, events planned with the attention to detail of someone who understands that environments communicate meaning. None of this is criticism. It is what it is, and most of it is genuinely lovely. What I had also noticed, more quietly, was where I fit in the curation. The first Christmas after their wedding, I drove 4 hours to their apartment. Priya had decorated it for the season with the skill of someone who had studied how rooms should look, and it was beautiful. A specific, coherent aesthetic that had been planned and executed with precision. When I arrived with the casserole I'd made because Devon has loved it since he was 9, there was a slight pause, a subtle recalibration in Priya's expression before she thanked me and found space for it in the refrigerator behind some items that were more photogenic. I noticed. I did not say anything. The following summer, Devon mentioned that Priya was planning a dinner party for her work colleagues, and then a week later, mentioned it again but didn't invite me. I had not expected to be invited. I didn't know these people, but the way he mentioned it twice told me he had thought about whether to invite me and arrived at a decision and was slightly uncomfortable with the decision. I noticed that too. There was a weekend I came to visit that fall. They had tickets to something downtown that evening, an event for one of her colleagues, and I had known about it before I came, and we'd agreed I'd have dinner by myself that night, and we'd have time together the following day. I'm not a needy person, and I don't require being included in everything, and I went to a restaurant alone that evening, and read and ate well, and had a genuinely fine time. But when Devon mentioned the event in casual passing, Priya's hand went to his arm briefly, the way people physically cue a change of subject. He changed the subject. I noticed. Small things, over 2 years. Not cruelty. Nothing you could point to and call unkind. A particular arrangement of priorities, communicated through the texture of what was included and what was not. I am a careful observer by profession and by nature, and I observed it carefully, and I drew no conclusions until conclusions were no longer optional. The shower was going to be a beautiful event. I had seen the planning unfold through Devon's occasional mentions, the venue deposit, the photographer, the catering, the color palette she'd chosen for the florals. It was going to be the kind of afternoon that photographs beautifully and makes everyone feel that they have attended something worth attending. And I was not the right element for that atmosphere. That was what the text said, underneath the "don't want you to feel out of place." The real sentence was, "You will make the aesthetic wrong. You are not the kind of presence that fits what we are building here." I understood it clearly. I have spent 21 years reading what numbers say underneath what they appear to say. The text was not subtle. Let me tell you about the account, because it matters. 4 months before that Tuesday, Devon had called to tell me Priya was pregnant. He was happy in the real way, not the performed way. I could hear it in his voice, the slightly overwhelmed quality of a man who has just understood that something enormous is actually happening. We talked for an hour. He told me about the due date, about the name they were considering, about the apartment they were thinking of moving out of. I hung up the phone and I sat in my office for a long time. My own grandmother, a woman named Beatrice who raised 3 children on a teacher's salary in a house she rented until she was 60, had told me once that the most powerful thing she ever wished she could give was time in the market. Not money, time. Money you can find, she said. Time you cannot buy back. She had wanted to start something for me when I was born, but there was nothing to start it with, and by the time she had something to start it with, too many years had passed. Beatrice used to sit with me at her kitchen table on Sunday afternoons when I was in my teens, showing me her savings account statements the way other grandmothers showed recipe cards. "Look at the interest," she'd say. "Now look what it would be if I'd started 10 years earlier." She'd do the math by hand, slowly, with a pencil, and she'd say every time, "That is why you start, the moment you have anything to start with. Not when you feel ready, not when it seems like enough, the moment." I carried that pencil math into my career. Into every client meeting where I show a family what the same dollar is worth at 25 versus 35 versus 45, the lines on the graph that diverge so dramatically that people sometimes don't believe them, they are always true. Beatrice was right about everything. I had time. I had money. I had both, which is the thing 21 years of patient building produces if you do it right. Those 4 months of building the account were some of the most satisfying work I'd done in years, and I want to tell you about them because they were real and because they're part of what closed when the account closed. The first decision was the structure. A simple custodial account versus a 529 versus a trust, each with different tax implications, different flexibility, different access rules at maturity. I chose a custodial investment account, more flexible than a 529, better suited to a grandchild's range of future options, whether that was college or trade school or a business or a down payment. An 18-year-old should be able to choose their own path. The money should be able to go where they decide to go. The second decision was the allocation. Growth-weighted, yes, with an 18-year horizon, but not recklessly so. I built in a glide path, aggressive in the early years, gradually shifting toward preservation as the target date approached. The same strategy I use for clients who have time to be patient and then need to be careful. The kind of structure that survives market downturns because it doesn't need to sell at the wrong moment. The third decision was the amount. $100,000 is not a number I arrived at casually. It is what my projections suggested would become, conservatively, something in the range of $350,000 at historical average returns over 18 years. Enough for a full college education at a private university, or 2 years of graduate school, or a first home down payment in a reasonable market, or some combination. Enough to give a child options instead of constraints. I spent 4 months on those decisions. On a Sunday evening in the 4th month, I transferred the funds, opened the account, and sat in my office for a few minutes looking at the confirmation. $100,000 in a custodial account with my grandchild's name on it. My grandchild, who did not yet exist outside a due date on a calendar. I thought about Beatrice's pencil math. I thought about how this is exactly what she'd wanted to do and couldn't. And I felt something I don't often feel about financial decisions, which is uncomplicated pride. I told Devin about it the following week. Short, factual, no ceremony. I've set up an education account for the baby. It's at the branch where you and Priya bank, so the eventual transfer will be seamless. Ms. Aldridge has the details. He said, "Mom, you didn't have to do that." I said, "I know," and the conversation moved on. I told one other person, my colleague Harriet, who runs the practice next to mine, and who knows me well enough that I don't perform anything for her. We have lunch every Tuesday, unless something has gone sideways on a portfolio. I told her the day after I opened the account. 100,000, she said. Yes, for a baby that hasn't been born yet. 18-year horizon. The compounding does most of the work. She looked at me in the way Harriet looks at things she finds both understandable and slightly beyond what she would have done. "Does Devin know what that actually means in numbers?" she said. "The projection?" I thought about it. "He knows there's an account, but not what it becomes." "No." She was quiet for a moment. "You should probably tell him." "I'll tell him when it matters," I said. "When the child is old enough to understand it." 2 weeks later, Devin sent the text. The account had been open for 11 days. Devon did not know its projected value. He had no idea what he was communicating about when he communicated that I was not the right presence. Neither did Priya. I want to be clear, I did not close the account to make them feel what they were losing. That would be manipulation, and I don't build financial plans or personal ones on manipulation. I closed it because the math had changed, because the context had changed. A recalibration was required. But the fact that they didn't know what they were declining is part of why Ms. Aldridge's call landed the way it did. Not just the number. What the number represented, someone had been building something quietly and carefully for 4 months, and in those same 4 months, they had been deciding where she fit in their picture. The answer had been, not here. 41 words, 11 days. Here is what I want you to understand about the 22 minutes it took me to close the account. I was not acting in anger. I want to be precise about this because anger is a legitimate emotion, but it is not a good financial advisor, and in 21 years of practice, I have learned to do nothing significant with money while I am feeling something strongly. The rule I give every client I've ever had: do not make a financial decision that matters from inside an emotional state. Wait. Let the state pass, then decide from what remains. I waited. I sat with the text for 7 minutes before I opened the laptop. I read it 3 more times in those 7 minutes. I made sure I was reading what it actually said, and not a version shaped by how I was feeling. Here is what it said. Your presence is a complication. Your presence is something we have to manage around. Your presence is an aesthetic problem in an environment your future grandchild's mother is building. And here is the question I asked myself, plainly, without decoration. Does it make sense to build an 18-year structure for a family that has communicated this? I want to be precise about what I was not thinking. I was not thinking about punishing anyone. Punishment is about the past. This was about the future, about what an account is actually doing when it exists inside a set of relationships. A financial instrument does not function in isolation. It exists in a context. The context I had just been informed of was one in which I was not a welcome presence. I was also not thinking about the child. This is the part people find hardest to believe when I tell them, but it is true. The child had not been born yet. The child had done nothing. The child was not the reason for the decision. The family structure was the reason, and the family structure was what I was assessing. An account closed today can be reopened tomorrow. Money moved back can start compounding again. Time lost is small when the lost time is weeks, and the horizon is 18 years. What cannot be recovered is a pattern established early that I am available to fund futures in families where I've been told to stay home. I was not building that pattern. The account closed at 12:06. The property damage report, that comparison belongs to a different story. The notification to Ms. Aldridge's system was automated upon closure. Ms. Aldridge's call to Priya went out at 12:09. I know these times because I checked the system log afterward, the way I check everything afterward. In my profession, you keep records. You always know exactly what happened and when. Between 12:08 and 12:14, I made coffee. I returned 3 client emails that had been waiting since morning. I pulled up a portfolio rebalancing report for a couple 18 months from retirement who needed their allocation adjusted. I was reading their numbers when the phone rang. Those 6 minutes mattered. Not dramatically, but I want to say clearly that in those 6 minutes, I was not sitting with my hands folded, waiting for something to happen. I was working, thinking carefully about other people's financial futures, which is what I do on any ordinary Tuesday. The account closing was 22 minutes in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, and on either side of it, I was an analyst at her desk. There is a version of this story where closing that account was a dramatic act, a statement, a performance. It was none of those things. It was a recalibration. A number that no longer made sense in its current context moved to where it would keep working while the context was reassessed. That is what I do all day. I move money to where it makes the most sense given the current reality. The current reality was 41 words on a Tuesday. At 12:14, my phone rang. Devon. Mom. His voice had the quality of a man who has just been running, except he hadn't been running. Hi, sweetheart. Priya just got a call from Ms. Aldridge. A pause. About the account. Yes, I said. She said it was closed. It was, I said. Another pause, longer. I let it sit, the way I let numbers sit when a client needs to absorb a projection they weren't expecting. Mom, why? He stopped, tried again. Is this because of the text? Devon, I said, do you remember what you wrote in that text? I was trying to be considerate. I didn't want you to feel out of place. Read me the text, I said. I don't need to read it, Read it to me, Devon. A pause, the sound of him finding it, and then he read it back. 41 words in his own voice, the words he'd typed quickly on a Tuesday morning, heard now as a sentence being examined for the first time. When he finished, there was a silence that told me something had shifted. What you wrote, I said, was that your wife has built a curated atmosphere for her fancy friends and I would make it wrong. That is what those words say, not what you meant, what they say. He was quiet. I opened that account 11 days ago, I said. 11 days before you told me I don't fit the environment. And I thought very carefully about whether those two facts belong in the same sentence, and the answer I arrived at is that they don't. The money is for the baby, he said. It's not about the shower. You're right that it's not about the shower, I said. The shower is one afternoon. What the shower is about is how your wife sees me, and more importantly, how you see me. Because you sent that text, Devon, not Priya, you. The silence that came after that had a different texture, heavier. I let it do its work. I didn't think about it that way, he said. I know you didn't, I said. You thought you were being practical. You thought you were smoothing something over so no one had to be uncomfortable. That's been your approach your whole life, and it usually works, and sometimes the cost of it lands on the person who was smoothed over. This time, it landed on me. He said nothing. The account existed because I wanted to give that child a head start my grandmother wished she could have given me, I said. It's a significant amount of money. When I decided to open it, I was thinking about the baby. When I decided to close it, I was thinking about the environment that baby is going to grow up in, and what my role in that environment is, and I'm not prepared to fund a future in a family where I'm told in a text message to stay home from a party because I might make the atmosphere complicated. A very long pause. What would it take? Devon said finally. His voice was quieter now, the careful voice he gets when he's actually thinking, rather than reacting. I need you to understand what that text said, I said. Not what you meant it to say, what it said. And I need you to talk to your wife, honestly, about what kind of family you're building and where I am in it. Not because of the money, because of the baby. That child is going to grow up knowing their grandmother in a certain way, and that way is being decided right now, in choices like the one that text represented. And the account? The money is sitting in my account, I said. It's not gone, it's waiting. What it's waiting for is a family I feel certain it belongs in. He called back 3 days later. Not the same day, which told me he'd actually done the thing I'd asked, instead of the thing that would have made the conversation end faster. He and Priya had talked. He told me this in the careful way of someone reporting on a conversation that had been real and therefore difficult. She had not known about the account, or had not registered the significance of it, and when Ms. Aldridge's call arrived, it had landed with a weight she hadn't expected. The conversation that followed had apparently covered ground they hadn't covered before. She wants to know if you'd come to dinner, Devon said. Her and me and you. Not to apologize necessarily. I think she's still working out what she thinks about all of it. But to actually talk. Yes, I said. I'll come to dinner. The dinner was 3 weeks before the shower. I will not tell you it was easy, because it wasn't, and I am not interested in stories where difficult things become simple because someone writes a scene. Priya chose the restaurant, which told me something. She wanted the terrain to be familiar, which meant she understood this was a real conversation and was preparing for it the way she prepares for things that matter. Good restaurant, the kind with cloth napkins and a sommelier who visits the table without being called. The kind of environment she excels in. We ordered. We sat with our menus for a moment, doing the thing people do when they're deciding how to begin. Then she put her menu down and said, "I didn't know about the account, not the amount. Devin told me you'd set something up, but I didn't. I didn't register what that meant." She stopped. Until Ms. Aldridge called. "What did you register when she called?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. That I had made a very significant mistake. "Tell me what the mistake was," I said, not to be unkind, because I needed to know if she understood the actual thing. She thought about it. "I thought about you the way I think about—" She stopped, started again. "I make a lot of decisions about what fits and what doesn't. It's what I do for work, and I think somewhere I started doing that with people too, including you." She met my eyes. "That text was Devin, telling you that you don't fit. I know that's what it was, and I was the reason he sent it." "Devin sent it," I said. "Devin is 42 years old and he makes his own decisions." "He does," she said, "but he sent it because I'd been—" She stopped. "I've been building something, ours, and I think I made it smaller than it should be. I left people out who should be in it." She asked me 2 real questions over that dinner. Not polite questions, actual ones, about what I do and how, about the account and how it was structured, about what she should be doing for their own financial future with the baby coming. I answered at length because financial honesty is what I do, and I find it genuinely difficult to do anything else with it. By the end of 3 hours, she had the beginning of a savings framework for the next 5 years, and I had the beginning of an understanding of who she actually was, underneath the curation. Both of those things are worth having. I went to the shower, not as the woman who doesn't fit the aesthetic, as the baby's grandmother, which is what I am, which is not something a text message can change. The event was as beautiful as I'd expected. Florals in the palette she'd chosen, a dessert table that had been styled to within an inch of its life, guests who moved through the space with the ease of people accustomed to moving through beautiful spaces. I wore the deep blue dress I've had for years and love, and I found a seat near the window, and I talked to the woman on my left about her work in environmental law, and to the woman on my right about the best ways to fly cross-country with an infant, both of which were genuinely interesting conversations. One of Priya's friends asked what I did. When I explained, she said, "Wait, you run your own practice?" and asked 4 follow-up questions with the focus of someone whose interest was real, and we talked until Priya called everyone to the gift table. On her way past, Priya caught my eye and gave me the small nod of someone who has been paying attention. After, when the guests were gone and Devin was loading gifts into the car, Priya came and stood beside me on the porch. "The account," she said. "Yes," I said. Did you reopen it?" "Not yet," I said. She looked out at the yard. The late afternoon was doing something lovely with the light through the trees. "Will you?" she said. "I'm working on the answer to that," I said. And I was. I am a careful person. I don't make financial decisions before the analysis is complete. I reopened the account 2 weeks after the shower. Not because everything was resolved. It wasn't. And it won't be cleanly for a while. Families are not balance sheets, but the direction had changed. Devin was pointed differently than he'd been on the Tuesday of the text. Priya was pointed differently than she'd been at 2 years of curated atmospheres. That is not a guarantee. It is information, and it was enough information to act on. The money sitting still in my account while I waited for perfect circumstances was the same as Beatrice not having enough to start. Wasted time. The one thing that does not come back. Esme didn't need a perfect family to deserve a head start. She needed the head start, and a grandmother who was in her life. I could give both of those things now. Same account, same structure, same 18-year horizon. My grandchild was born on a Thursday morning, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with Devon's forehead and Priya's exact expression of profound skepticism about the situation she had arrived in. I was in the waiting room when she came. Devon came out after an hour, still in his hospital bracelet, and he looked the way new fathers look when the magnitude of what just happened has arrived before the words for it. He said, "She's here, Mom," and his voice broke a little on the last word, in the way it does when Devon is moved past the point of managing it. They let me in to hold her when she was 20 minutes old. Small and warm and frowning at everything, the way new people frown at the world before they've decided whether they're going to like it. I held her, and I thought about Beatrice, about Sunday afternoons and pencil math, and the line on the graph that diverges so dramatically over time that people don't believe it. About what it means to start early, about the account that was sitting in the market right now, already working, already growing toward the person this child was going to become. Priya watched me hold her daughter, and something in her face was different from anything I'd seen in 2 years of knowing her. Softer, and not in the performed way, in the way of someone who has just arrived somewhere they hadn't expected to arrive. "What are you going to call her?" I asked. "Esme," Priya said. "That's beautiful," I said, and meant it. She is luminous. She is also going to need money for college in 18 years, and that money is in a custodial account at the branch where her parents bank, growing quietly the way patient money grows, compounding in the direction of a future I am building for her, the same way Beatrice wished she could have built something for me. Esme is 9 weeks old now. She has Devon's forehead and Priya's skeptical frown, and what I believe are going to be very strong opinions about everything once she figures out how to express them. She doesn't know about the account. She will when she's old enough, and when she asks who set it up and why, I'll tell her about Beatrice, about what time in the market means, and about the Tuesday morning when I closed the account, and the 3 weeks after, and the dinner at the restaurant with the cloth napkins, and the shower, and the porch conversation where Priya asked if the account was open, and I said not yet. Because that story is part of what Esme is inheriting too, not just the money, the understanding of what it took to build it, and what it means, and what it's for, the understanding that a head start is not just numbers in an account, it is someone deciding, before you existed, that you were worth preparing for. That someone was thinking about your future before you had one. Beatrice thought about mine before I had one. She just didn't have the time in the market. Esme has it. I made sure of that. Here's what I'd want you to carry from this, and I'll say it plain because I find plain more useful than dressed up. Money is a tool. What matters is not what it is, but what it's doing. The $100,000 in my account on that Tuesday was not doing what I had intended it to do. It was positioned to fund a head start in a family that had just told me, in 41 words, that I was not the right element for their atmosphere. That is not a good use of a tool. Closing the account was an accurate accounting. A gift given while the giver is being made invisible is not a gift. It is a subsidy for invisibility, and I have spent 21 years building things too carefully to spend 18 years subsidizing a future in a family that texted me to stay home. Here is the thing that actually matters in this story, and it is not the account. It is the 3-day call. Devon could have called me back that same afternoon. He could have said the right things quickly, the things designed to end the conversation in the direction he wanted it to go. That is what the easy version of Devon would have done, the version that smooths things over. I have watched that version operate for 42 years and I know it well. He called 3 days later, which meant he did not call until he had actually done the thing I asked him to do. He talked to Priya. He had the conversation that was harder than calling me back with reassurances would have been. He did the slow thing instead of the fast thing. That is the accounting that matters, not $100,000, the 3-day gap. I have a client, a woman in her late 60s, who came to me years ago after her husband died and left their finances in disorder. We spent 2 years sorting it out. She told me once that what surprised her most about the process was that money, which she'd always thought of as something people fought over, turned out to be just information. Numbers that told you what was happening, what had happened, what would happen if you kept on the way you were going. That is what I've always believed. Money is information. The account closing was information. Ms. Aldridge's call was information. What Devon and Priya did with that information was the actual story. They did something real with it. That is not guaranteed. That is not common. That is worth acknowledging. Subscribe to this channel. Every story here is for the person who has been building quietly, for people who don't know what's being built. Hit subscribe, because this is the place where that work gets to be seen. My name is Serena. Esme is 9 weeks old. The account is open, and the money is compounding exactly the way patient money does. Time you cannot buy back. Start early. Harriet asked me, at Tuesday lunch a few weeks after Esme was born, how things had settled. The account is open, I said. And Devon? He calls on Sundays now, I said, with questions, about the account, about the portfolio structure, about what Esme should understand about money when she's old enough to understand anything. I paused. He asked me last week what his own education account looked like when he was young, how I structured it. Harriet smiled. Did you tell him? I told him everything, I said. Every decision, every number, every reason. She nodded. Better late. Yes, I said. But late still counts. That's what I've always told clients who come to me at 40 thinking they've missed the window. Late still counts. You just have to start. Beatrice was right about everything.